American Reaction to Communism. National History Day Project, Revolution, Reaction, and Reform. By Maureen Breslin and Shannon McHugh. In the 1920s, communism was spreading throughout the Soviet Union like a wildfire. Such spread of the form of government brought a fear to Americans who were quite content with democracy. This fear, that communism would conquer over the United States, was known as the Red Scare. The Red Scare timeline: 1917 to 1920. The first Red Scare hits the United States. 1917. The communist takeover in Russia leads to the Red Scare in the US. 1918. The slaughter of Tsar Nicholas II intensifies the fear of communism. 1919. Supreme Court Justice receives threatening letters about communism. Rumors start to spread nationwide. 1945 to 1955. The Second Red Scare, aka McCarthyism, hits the United States. 1945. World War II leaves Europe with the Eastern Communist Bloc. 1947. The U.S. Congress revives the House Committee on Anti-Communist Activities. 1948. Alger Hiss, a U.S. State Department official, is falsely accused of being a Soviet spy. 1949. Maoists come to power in China. Also, Soviets detonate their own atomic bomb. 1950. Korean War starts. The United States continues to fight communism. McCarthyism also reaches its peak with the number of advocates. 1951. Two Soviet spies were caught collecting information on how to build more advanced nuclear weapons for the Soviet Union. Lastly, 1953. The two Soviet spies were sent to Sing Sing prison in New York, where they were executed, leading to the petering off of the Red Scare in the United States. Later, after the first epidemic of communism revolts had passed, another began resurrecting from its grave. The second wave of the Red Scare would soon sweep the nation and span for an entire decade, unlike its one-year precedent. This wave of communism spawned from 1947 to 1957. The protests against this pandemic were led by the most acclaimed anti-communist advocate, Wisconsin Senator Joseph McCarthy. McCarthy's motivating words encouraged people to be more radical in their actions to speak out against the growing plague of communism. Joseph McCarthy was a Republican senator of Wisconsin, where he was also born and raised. McCarthy was very opposed of the current president during the Red Scare, Harry Truman, accusing him of being a communist himself and declaring that he needed to be impeached. McCarthy was very popular among Catholics, both Republican and Democratic ones, as he gained their favor, and the majority of them were vehement opponents of communism. Probably a big impact of the Catholics' favor of him was the fact that McCarthy developed a great bond with the prestigious Kennedy family, who were devout Catholics themselves. The first Red Scare and the second Red Scare are referred to as the Red Scare and McCarthyism respectively. During the McCarthyism era, many people were held with allegations of being communists and were dealt with accordingly. The most nefarious account of these accusations, both false and true, was the Hollywood blacklisting, though it did not only take place amongst the stars. Blacklisting was a direct attempt in destructing the career of the accused individual by publishing their name under the blacklist. In Hollywood blacklisting, the most prominent celebrities were accused of being in the American Communist Party, and it was quite common for stars, producers, editors, and directors to be blacklisted. Many celebrities lost big roles in movies because of being blacklisted by the government. Though the government had the largest impact on influencing the Red Scare, many common citizens also pulled their own weight in dragging it out. Through the powerful forces of the media, millions of Americans became conscious of the Red Scare and what it potentially could mean. This aroused their interest and led many to become self-proclaimed opponents of communism, just as the government had planned. After becoming aware of the Red Scare, many Americans set out to speak their voice against communism and what they felt were its many wrongs and went to protests. They'd built picket signs and protests, raising awareness to the uninformed and piquing the attention of others who were previously apathetic to the situation, or perhaps even convincing the ambivalent onto their side. Agree or disagree, these protests were powerful. The ones that flooded New York often made the cover page of leading newspapers such as the New York Times, and were stories highlighted by the news. The several protests throughout both the first and second Red Scare spoke volumes for the average American's outlook on communism. The loudest voice of anti-communism was propaganda. Propaganda was fluently produced in the United States, mainly by the government, but also from other self-sufficient businesses and sundry other sources during the Red Scare. Propaganda came in many shapes and sizes, most popularly images. Lots and lots of posters and political cartoons were produced to undermine communism and promote democracy. There were also tons of commercials, ads in newspapers, bulletin boards, etc. Anywhere a voice could be heard in the time of the Red Scare, you could bet there'd be anti-communist propaganda posted.
Societies.
In recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it. If a person consistently reads and advocates the views expressed in a communist publication, he may be a communist. If a person supports organizations which reflect communist teachings, or organizations labeled communist by the Department of Justice, she may be a communist. If a person defends the activities of communist nations while consistently attacking the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, she may be a communist. If a person does all these things over a period of time, he must be a communist. But there are other communists who don't show their real faces, who work more silently.
By the early 1950s, Communist Party membership had declined considerably, but Cold War propaganda inflated its threat to fantastic proportions. An evil so pervasive that the whole society had to be mobilized to combat it.
May Day brings a wave of anti-communist sentiment as 100,000 march down New York's Fifth Avenue in a loyalty parade. Everyone from vets to youngsters reveals his inborn dislike of communism. A united answer to those menacing our country's liberty.
Sergeant, check the kitchen. You look in the back. I'll be upstairs. Hey!
What is this? Where do you think you're going?
We have no time for explanations. Already we are 15 minutes behind schedule.
I don't care who sent your why. You're not going to take another step until I see your warrant.
Warrant? We need no warrant. As a member of the Young Communist League, your daughter has volunteered for farm work. She's to be transported immediately. The truck is waiting outside.
You say my daughter volunteered?
That is correct. Here's the signature. Requesting transport to the People's Collective.
Signature on that piece of paper is false. And everything you've said is a lie because my daughter would never leave here of her own free will.
Sergeant!
You've got no right to be in this house. I'm going to give you just 10 seconds to get out of here.
Daddy? It's true, Daddy. I did volunteer for farm work.
Linda, why?
The party convinced me that I should free myself of the lingering bourgeois influence of family life. I am ready. Do not interfere. It is for my own good.
And Comrade Donovan, do not think that your deviationist remarks shall be overlooked. It will be reported to the proper authorities.
Frightening, isn't it?
Both the Red Scare and McCarthyism had a huge impact on American life. Americans felt their freedom was threatened, and they'd go to huge lengths to keep it protected. To this day, most Americans feel strongly about the preservation of democracy and freedom. Today, although the Soviet Union no longer exists, and Russia is no longer communist, there are other countries with huge communist governments. You could argue that a mini Red Scare is always present within the US, as the US deters China and North Korea's way of governing their nations by the use of communism. As evidenced by history, it seems that Americans are quite vocal and will continue to be vocal about the benefits of democracy and maintaining the right to democracy within their nation, and also working towards everyone acquiring that right internationally.